So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Nadia Whittome being sacked from the her spot of the in the shadow cabinet over her opposing a certain bill, a veterans bill, and so we'll look into some aspects of the bill. I haven't had a massive in-depth look, but from what I've seen, it doesn't look great. Labour's position is to abstain from the bill. I don't understand why. I think it kind of plays into the philosophy of Britain first and all this stuff like, oh, we're not going to prosecute our British soldiers and stuff. And so if we look at her objection, so Labour MP Nadia Whittome said she had been sacked from her junior role after voting against a new law making it harder for military veterans to be prosecuted for past actions. So we'll get into that in a minute. Labour MPs Olivia Blake and Ben Winter, who also stepped down from their roles. The government says the bill will protect the armed forces from vexatious prosecutions, but critics argue it could decriminalise torture. And another issue is, the government calls them like do-gooder lawyers who are, trying to, cause problems for the government and for like other groups. Like they're the same ones who, these sort of lawyers the government blames are the ones who are making not extradition, but deporting of asylum seekers / migrants coming over the channel more difficult. And so I think these are the same types of lawyers the government are very annoyed about, and wrongfully so, because these guys actually, if you're wrong and it's proven in court you're wrong, then why are you mad? That there is a specific issue I'll talk about in a minute where there can be issues with the way the military are treated. So some classic both sidesing, but I think it's important to talk about this thing because it's there's a lot to unpack here. So the government says the bill will protect the armed forces from. I've covered that. 18 Labour MPs, including former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, voted against it. Miss Whitmore said the Overseas Operations Service Personnel and Veterans Bill was anti-veteran and anti-human rights. So she was sacked. It's so important. A Labour source told the PA agency anyone who wanted to vote against the whip was told they would have to resign. And essentially, she didn't resign, so she was sacked. It's generally how it goes. I disagree with this stance massively. It's so stupid. Why the Labour Party have taken this stance. I don't understand what Starmer's doing, and that's something we'll talk about in a minute. Damaging bill. So two other parliamentary private secretaries, Beth Winter and Olivia Blake, have stepped down after voting against the bill. Labour says in a statement, Ms Whittome said, I oppose the bill because it effectively decriminalises torture, makes it harder for veterans to take legal action against the government or for war crimes to be investigated. This is something the US has done as well, where they put sanctions, I think it's the International Criminal Court, the US put sanctions on them for trying to investigate potential war crimes the US has committed, which is really backward and really stupid. I think if we have committed war crimes, we should be, held accountable for that. Absolutely, we should. If there's any other group, we would, if there's any group we didn't like, we would do the same to them. So why do we hold ourselves in higher stead? We're not the good guys by definition. No one is. So the decision to break the Labour whip was difficult, and I understand many of my colleagues came to a different conclusion and decided to abstain on this bill in the sincere hope that the bill can be amended at a later stage. The bill won't be amended though, that's the thing. The bill won't be amended because they have an 80-seat majority. So at least show that you're against this sort of stuff. But the Labour Party abstained, and I think it plays into their British first mentality. But we'll go into that bit. It strikes me that if a piece of legislation has had concerns raised by the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the British Legion, Amnesty International, and other organisations on the front line of supporting veterans and defeating human rights, we need to stop and ask ourselves why. Ms Blake said she didn't believe the bill could be amended to fix the fundamental flaws in the bill. Also, this was some sort of manifesto promise, so the Lords can't stop this either. She also argued that the bill makes it harder for these ex-military personnel to sue the ministry for failure in its duty to care for them, meaning troops who develop PTSD, blindness and other conditions would be left with no recourse to justice. And, this shows you, if this is the case, that the government really do not care about veterans. All they care about is saving money, and that's the reason why they don't go through the courts, because it's very expensive, the legal process for, the MOD and obviously the taxman and the public who pays for these prosecutions. And so double standards. Labour's front bench said, although the government had got parts of the bill badly wrong, it could still be proved at a later stage wrong. The party's shadow Defence Minister Stephen Morgan said, we all agree that we must protect our troops from vexatious claims, but said that the government bill fails to properly protect against vexatious claims and undermines Britain's proud adherence to international law. Bruv, didn't we break international law to invade Iraq? Responding to Miss Whitmore sacking, Labour's former shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott tweeted, violates essential rule of law principles, and that Miss Whittome had voted absolutely with Labour values. And if you do allow this bill to get passed, then you can't talk about the government breaking international law with the withdrawal agreement, because it looks very dodgy what's going on here. The bill itself has been criticised by senior military officials, including Sir Nicholas Parker, Commander-in-Chief, Land Forces, 2010 to 2012. He said he was worried Britain would risk the UK being perceived as setting double standards. And I think that is absolutely correct now. That he's correct in this, and if he's got criticism from the military as well, you've got to ask the question that who does this actually benefit then? It also introduces a statutory presumption against prosecution, so I think it's kind of more innocence before proving guilt, which I suppose makes sense. This story here talks about one of those vexatious claims about the law. So the bill, which was promoted in the Conservative Manifesto, was partly promoted by the case of lawyer Phil Shiner, who brought the abuse claim against the UK troops after the Iraq War. He was struck off after admitting to acting recklessly by claiming the UK troops had tortured Iraqis. The Defence Secretary Sir Michael Fallon accused Mr. Shiner of making soldiers' lives a misery. The current Defence Secretary Ben Wallace insists the bill is not an amnesty or decriminalise erroneous acts. I mean, it does after a certain time frame, which we'll talk about, which is 5 years. It's any claims that basically happen after 5 years will not be allowed to go through the courts. So if you're accused of torture, say in 2026, nothing will happen to you because of this bill. Also, I think it goes for previous cases as well, but I'm not sure. In addition to the 18 Labour MPs, the SNP and Liberal Democrats also opposed it. However, it passed a second reading by 331 votes to 77, which makes sense because Labour abstained, or some of them did anyways, and will now be debated in more detail by MPs at a later date. And so Labour are hoping for an amendment. That's not going to happen. So if we talk about her quickly, she's basically an assistant to John Ashworth as well as being an MP. It's an unpaid position. And if we look at what some Conservatives have said, senior Conservative MP David Davies, a former cabinet minister, has said he is deeply troubled by government plans to decriminalise torture by British personnel if it took place more than 5 years ago. And obviously, it can take time for legal proceedings to happen, especially if you're obviously with the army, you'd be deployed in foreign countries. They're deployed in multiple foreign countries, which is something we'll talk about in a few minutes. But say, for example, if torture happened in 2010, it means that these soldiers would be protected from it, which is just stupid. If British soldiers are, incredibly accused of torture, they should be punished because it creates more problems later on. As well as being, a major problem, torture is inherently wrong. There's a reason why countries are not allowed to do it. There's a reason why JITMO is so problematic. It's mainly because of torture, and mainly because it's extrajudicial and they have no recourse. But at the same time, the main point is you torture people, you don't get anything viable from it apart from punishing people for no reason. It's a very stupid thing to do. And so here we've got Conservative MPs who are very concerned by the bill. I wonder which way they'll vote. So we'll go on. We'll talk about the deployments of the UK military, the British military. I do have some issues even with this map because there's deployments Africa, like where? Like I clicked on it, it didn't show me where, but it shows you on the map here. You got Nigeria, South Sudan, Kenya, and Mogadishu, as well as okay, that's not Africa, but yeah, if we scroll down a bit, Afghanistan, Baltics. Some of these places won't be combat zones, like Canada. Obviously, it's not a combat zone. Gibraltar, none of these places are combat zones, but obviously Iraq is, Afghanistan is, and Africa is. Because I think South Sudan, are they still going through some sort of war? I'm not sure. We can see is they're still being deployed. So if any British soldier commits any act of torture, say in Mogadishu or in Kenya, 5 years from now, they won't be punished. And you can say, why didn't people come through quicker? It's very difficult, I'd imagine, to actually put a case against British soldiers. You'd need a legal team. You'd need a lot of things, especially if you're poor. I don't know how you would do it. But, we do have instances of, where, I'm not sure how, watertight this case is, but we can see that, it takes a very long time for some of these cases to actually conclude. And so British ex-soldier Major Robert Campbell cleared over Iraqi teenager's death. So a British ex-soldier has been cleared over the death of an Iraqi teenager after 17 years of investigation. Saeed Shabram's family say he drowned after being forced into a river by the UK soldiers in Basra in 2003, but a report published on Tuesday says there was no reliable evidence that soldiers were responsible. Major Robert Campbell, one of the accused soldiers, said he had finally been exonerated, but the allegations had destroyed his career. None of the soldiers were ever charged over the death, despite criminal inquiry by military police and further investigations by the now defunct Iraq Historical Allegations Team. Mr. Shabram's death became the subject of a judge-led inquiry by the Iraq Fatalities Investigations Team. So there's the argument of, did he jump into the water or was he pushed? And so that's one of the key issues here. And there are witnesses who say, different things. And so without going into extreme details about this case, he said it took 17 years for any conclusion to happen. And so, I don't know what happens to a soldier who's accused of something like this. I think perhaps if soldiers wore body cams on deployment, I don't know if, I don't... In this case, it probably wasn't. It most likely wasn't, but I think maybe that's a thing to do. It's much harder to do anything wrong if you have to wear body cams and if everything's filmed. But at the same time, like you can see, this is a major issue. It took 17 years for, this man's career to essentially... I don't know what happens to him now. I don't know if he was, let go over the situation or if he was still deployed. It would be a very weird situation if he was. So something has to happen here. Obviously, judicial cases do take a long time. But at the same time, if he was struck off for this, then it does create an issue because that's his career gone. But what we can see from this overall is the fact that this bill does not protect those sorts of people. This bill is designed to, according to Nadia Whittome, is to protect the government from being sued by soldiers over things like PTSD and other medical problems. And it's also designed to protect people who commit torture over a set period of time. So the government are lying, and it's not really there to protect soldiers. It's there more to protect themselves from court cases that are expensive, especially if say for example the soldiers try to sue over something, they may not be able to because of this bill. And that's just the top and bottom of it. So I have a lot of respect for Nadia Whittome. I think she's doing the right thing. Collective responsibility still exists, and this is an instance of it. I'm disappointed in the Labour Party. I'll conclude on this. They have been incredibly disrespectful to minorities. There was the situation with Kashmir where the Labour Party said it's an internal issue for India. I've heard very little from the Conservative the Labour Party over the Uyghur Muslims, which is a big deal. This whole Britain First thing, where they're gonna this is what something they'll spin as we're on the side of the soldiers here, when not taking into account some of the atrocities they may or may not have done, and there's no recourse for anyone who has been affected by this. Both the soldiers will have less recourse against the MOD, and victims will have less recourse against the MOD. And so I have a lot of issues with the Labour Party, and they're not... I don't know what they're doing, but they will not win the argument of who's the more patriotic and nationalistic. That is not an argument that we're going to win, and I'm incredibly disappointed in the Labour Party. And I'm going to wrap it up there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.